She laughed. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the conference, not the 3 nights away, not even the fact that she was going with him. It was the laugh. I had stood in our kitchen on a Tuesday night with the dishes still in the sink and the TV on in the other room. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I said it clearly, calmly, the way you say something when you've already thought it through 100 times before you open your mouth. If you go to that conference with him, we're done. She looked at me for a second. Then she smiled a little, shook her head, and laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not a mocking one. Worse, it was dismissive, like I had said something that didn't require a real response, like my boundary was a minor inconvenience she could step around on her way out the door. She said, "You're being ridiculous." Then she went back to folding laundry. I stood there for a moment. I didn't follow her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask her to explain herself or take it back. I just stood in that kitchen and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not hurt. Something quieter than both of those. Something final. I had meant every word. The thing about ultimatums is that most people treat them like opening offers. Like the other person will push back, there will be a negotiation, and eventually both sides meet somewhere in the middle. That's not what an ultimatum is. An ultimatum is a door, and when you give someone one, you're telling them exactly what's on the other side of it. She had heard me. She just didn't believe me. That was the mistake. Not the conference, not him, not even whatever did or didn't happen in that hotel. The mistake was looking at me, a man who had never once said something he didn't mean, and deciding I was bluffing. I wasn't. We had been married for 7 years. The first 4 were good. Not perfect, but genuinely good. We built something real together. A house, a routine, a life that felt like it was going somewhere. She was sharp and driven and funny in a dry way that I had loved from the first month I knew her. I wasn't unhappy. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't a man looking for a way out. But somewhere around year 5, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no single fight, no blow-up, no moment I could point to and say, that's where it started. It was smaller than that. She got a promotion. New team, new responsibilities, longer hours. I was proud of her. I told her that. But the longer hours brought new people into her life, and one of those people was Daniel. She mentioned him casually at first, the way you mention anyone from work. Daniel said this in the meeting. Daniel handled that account. Daniel's really good at his job. I didn't think much of it. I'm not an insecure man. I wasn't threatened by a name. But names have a way of becoming people, and people have a way of taking up space. By year 6, Daniel was at every work event she mentioned. He was the one she texted during dinners when her phone lit up. He was the reason she came home energized on days I knew had been stressful. I noticed. I didn't explode. I asked her once, directly, whether there was something I should know. She said I was imagining things. She said Daniel was just a colleague. She seemed almost annoyed that I'd asked. So I watched, quietly, the way you watch when someone you love is standing near a ledge and they don't seem to know it's there. The conference was announced in the spring, 4 days, out of state. Her company sent a small team. Daniel was on that team. That's when I stopped watching and started deciding. She left on a Thursday morning. I carried her bag to the car. I kissed her on the cheek. She smiled and said she'd call me when she landed. It was all very normal. That's the thing about the end of something. It rarely looks like an ending from the outside. She did call when she landed. Short conversation.
She was tired from the flight, excited about the hotel, already talking about the opening dinner that night. I said, "Have fun." I meant nothing by it. She hung up. That was the last real conversation we had as a married couple, though neither of us knew it yet. The first night was quiet. I made dinner for one, which I hadn't done in years. I watched something on TV I'd been meaning to watch. I went to bed at a reasonable hour. Normal enough. The second day is when the timeline started to break. She had told me the conference sessions ran until 6 each evening, dinner with the team after, back to the room by 10:30. That was the plan she'd described. So when she posted a photo on her personal account at 11:42 at night, laughing at a rooftop bar, Daniel visible at the edge of the frame, I noticed. I didn't text her about it. I just noted it. The next morning she called, cheerful, said last night had been exhausting, said she'd gone to bed early. I said, that's good, you needed the rest. I already had the screenshot. That afternoon, a mutual friend texted me, awkward and hesitant, asking if I was doing okay. She had seen the same photo. She wasn't the only one. My wife's account wasn't private. People we both knew were seeing a version of that trip that didn't match what I was being told. I wasn't being told anything. That was the problem. By the end of the second night, I wasn't angry. I was just clear. The picture I'd been given of that trip and the picture being posted online were two different pictures, and I had already told her exactly what that would mean. I didn't wait for her to come home. That's the part people find hard to understand. They expect the confrontation to happen at the door, the suitcase hitting the floor, the raised voices, the demands for explanation. That's the version of this story most people are used to. That's not what happened.
My Saturday morning, while she was still 2 states away, I had already made 3 phone calls. The first was to a divorce attorney. I had found his name 6 weeks earlier, not because I was planning anything, but because some part of me had already understood where this was heading. I hadn't saved the number out of paranoia. I had saved it the way you save the number for a doctor you hope you never need. That Saturday morning, I needed him. The conversation was calm and practical. I told him the situation. He told me what I needed to do first. I did it. The second call was to my bank. I didn't drain anything. I didn't do anything vindictive or illegal. I simply separated what was mine into an account she didn't have access to. My attorney had advised it. It was clean, and it was quiet, and it was done within the hour. The third call was to my brother. Not for advice, not to vent, just to tell someone who loved me what was happening, so I wasn't carrying it completely alone. He didn't say much. He said, "Do you need me to come over?" I told him no. He said, "Okay." That was enough. After those 3 calls, I packed a bag. Not everything, just what I needed for a week. I left it by the door, not because I was leaving, but because I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. Then, I sat down on the couch in the quiet house, and I felt, for the first time in months, completely at peace. Not happy, not vindicated, just settled. The uncertainty was gone. The waiting was over. I had told her exactly what would happen. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. She was still in the air when I had already decided. The marriage had ended before she landed. She came home on a Sunday afternoon. I heard her key in the lock. I was sitting in the living room. No TV, no phone in my hand. Just sitting. The way you sit when you've already made peace with something, and you're just waiting for the last formality to finish. She came in smiling, rolling her suitcase behind her.
She looked relaxed, which told me everything I needed to know about how that trip had felt to her. She said, "Hey." She asked if I was hungry. She said she'd picked up something from the airport. I said, "Sit down." She stopped. Something in my voice registered. Not what I said, but how I said it. Flat and quiet and without any invitation for negotiation. She looked at me for a moment, and then she looked at the coffee table. The papers were sitting there. Printed, organized, paper-clipped. My attorney had moved quickly because I had been clear about what I wanted, and I had given him everything he needed before she'd even boarded her return flight. She stared at them. Then she looked at me. She said, "What is this?" Not a question, more like something she was saying to buy herself a second to process what her eyes were already telling her. I said, "You know what it is." The smile was gone. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch across from me, still in her coat. She hadn't let go of her suitcase handle. I don't think she realized that. She just sat there, holding on to it, staring at the papers like they were something she could will out of existence if she looked hard enough. I didn't yell. I didn't list her failures. I didn't tell her about the screenshots or the timeline or the phone calls I'd already made. I didn't need to perform any of it. The papers said everything. After a long moment, she said, "You're serious." I said, "I told you I was." That's when it hit her. Not the papers, not the attorney's name printed at the top. The thing that hit her was the memory of that Tuesday night in the kitchen, the laundry, the laugh. She had thought I was bluffing. She understood now that I never was. She didn't sign anything that day. That's not how it works. And she knew that. So she did what people do when they're cornered by a consequence they chose but didn't expect. She fought it. Not with honesty, with volume. She said I was overreacting.
She said nothing happened at that conference, that Daniel was just a colleague, that I was punishing her for something she didn't do. She said I was controlling. She said the ultimatum itself had been unreasonable, that no healthy marriage runs on threats, that I had backed her into a corner, and now I was blaming her for not standing still inside it. I let her talk. I didn't argue with any of it. Not because she was right, but because the conversation she wanted to have was the one where my reaction becomes the subject, where we stop talking about what she did and start talking about how I responded. I had seen that move before. I wasn't going to take it. When she finished, I said, "I told you what would happen. You made your choice." She cried. Real tears, I think. I don't say that coldly. I believe she was genuinely devastated. But there is a difference between being devastated by a loss and being devastated by a consequence. She wasn't mourning what she'd done. She was mourning that it had actually cost her something. The news moved through our social circle the way these things do, fast and uneven. Her version reached some people first. Mine didn't need to reach anyone, because the photos were still up on her account, time-stamped and visible, and people who knew us both could do the math. Daniel went quiet. No public statement, no dramatic exit. He just became unavailable. That silence said more than anything he could have offered. 2 friends stopped calling me. 4 others called to check in. I didn't hold the first group against her. People choose sides based on what's convenient for them, and that tells you something useful about who they are. The process moved forward. She got an attorney. The back and forth began. It was unpleasant in the way these things are always unpleasant, but it was never out of control. I had decided early that I wasn't going to let it become a war. I just wanted it finished. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday.
No dramatic courtroom moment, no final argument in a hallway, just signatures, a judge, and then it was done. 7 years reduced to a legal conclusion on a gray midweek morning. I drove home alone and sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. I didn't feel victorious. I want to be honest about that. There is a version of this story where the ending feels like a win, where the wronged party walks away clean and righteous and whole. That's not what finalization feels like. It feels like amputation. Necessary, maybe, but still a loss. She had lost more visibly. The social fallout had been harder on her than she'd expected. The story had a shape that was difficult to argue against, and people who respected her professionally now looked at her differently. Daniel had quietly moved to a different team within the company. Whatever had existed between them, real or implied, had not survived the exposure. She had risked the marriage for something that hadn't even held its own weight once the pressure hit. That was its own kind of cost. I didn't celebrate it. What I kept coming back to in the weeks after was the laugh. Not what happened at the conference, not the photos or the timeline or the attorney fees. The laugh in the kitchen on a Tuesday night. That small, dismissive sound that said, "You don't really mean that." That said, "Your words have no weight." That said, "I know you better than you know yourself, and you will not actually follow through." She had been wrong about one thing and right about everything else. She did know me. We had 7 years together, and she understood who I was, what I valued, how I operated. But she had miscalculated on the one thing that mattered most. She thought my love for her was bigger than my respect for myself. It wasn't. That's the only lesson I took out of that kitchen, out of that conference, out of that gray Wednesday morning in the driveway.
When someone shows you exactly who they are by laughing at your boundary, believe them. And when you say something, mean it. I did.